Well, Chuck was right and wrong about something last week. First of all, you have no idea how stressful it is. He's totally right. How stressful it is to dress yourself before you come and speak on stage in a political series. Like, can't have any red, can't have any blue. Someone's gonna be reading into that and figuring, I have gray and white on, cannot read into this. Now, someone's gonna be coming up in a little bit to help me out here who has red on. I assure you, he was not thinking politics when he put red on. So I agree with Chuck on that. I'll tell you the thing I disagree. I hope he's wrong. Really, Chuck is the pastor you like? That's what he said last week. He said he's the pastor you like. Do you not like me? Do you not like me? You're not even like reacting. You're like, yeah, that's really true. Fine. Fine. Wow. Okay. Well, I like me. God likes me. I think my mom likes me, but oh my. Chuck also talked about something else that was really, really insightful. He said, hey, we can vote on certain things, voting on the left, voting on the right, voting for this, but regardless of what we vote on, we have to get engaged. We have to get engaged with our world. We have to be a part of people's lives. I'm reminded of that as I just found out there's someone who's going to be doing a story on our church this week having to do with the amount of medical debt that we retired as a church. We recently got done with a series called The Blessed Life, and so many of us are doing things differently financially because we're sensing the blessings of God, and we want God more involved in our life. And we had a special thing, and it was like 1 week, it was like a 2-minute thing, just a 2-minute deal virtually, maybe 5 minutes. At the end of one of the times, said, hey, if anybody in here, any of us who are already tithing, and we want to go to a new place just for a one-time deal, we're going to be able to retire medical debt, people who have been in massive, massive problems through medical debt, and we can basically have a 100 to 1 or something like that in terms of what we give through rest in peace medical debt that buys medical debt from from hospitals and such. And you know how much medical debt we retired? We eliminated $46.5 million in medical debt. $46.5 million in medical debt. The partner we work with said, in a one-time shot, one-time act, that's the largest amount of medical debt that has ever been retired in one shot. Come on, who's excited about that? That is amazing. It's amazing. We've started to get stories that have come in with all the folks. 42 million of that money went to folks in the Cincinnati areas, and then 3.5 million to our sites and people who are part of Crossroads in places outside of Ohio. And here's just one of the stories that came back. Someone said this: I received this piece of mail in this bright yellow envelope and started to throw it away. I've gotten really good at not reading stuff before I throw it away these days. But when I saw that it said your medical debt has been paid, I thought, seriously? Wait a minute. When I read it, I got emotional because I've been so needing a break and getting my credit together. I really appreciate the gift. You have no idea how when trying to get on the right track, sometimes it seems like a really long journey. Thanks a lot. And that's sweet. I read that and I actually get happy. Happy. Makes me feel good. Makes me feel blessed. And it should you as well. One of the key verses that's trying to tie our series together comes from the book of Matthew chapter 5, where it says, blessed are the peacemakers, they shall be called sons of God. Blessed are the peacemakers. That's out of the ESV, the English Standard Version of the Bible. The Bible has been translated in all kinds of languages for people in every corner of the globe out of its original languages of Hebrew and Greek. That's the translations. The one we use mostly on stage here is the English Standard Version. It's kind of a literal version, word for word. But the one I've been using in my personal time with God recently has really been fresh for me. It's called the Common English Version, the CEV. And that verse, I just ran across it in my time with God just the other day, actually, and I was struck by how it translated it. It says, happy are those who make peace, because they will be called children of God. Happy are those. I read that, I was like, happy? That's ridiculous. The Bible doesn't say happy. I just happen to know Hebrew and Greek, so I said, let's check it out. So I went, I actually know where, I did take courses on that, I actually know where to get the answer. So I was like, let's go figure out, what do you know? That's a good little iteration of that word, happy. And I thought, man, could that be why nobody seems to be happy any longer? Because we're so into antagonistically interacting with each other. And I'll tell you what, who ever gets happy during an election cycle? No one gets happy, except for the 50% after the election cycle is over who happen to have won. My heart is broken how much we have been stolen from based on how our political process operates. And God does want something different for you and different for I. I was at a conference in Washington, D.C. a few months ago, and there's this guy who got up to speak. I'd never heard about him before, and he spoke, and I just sat there going, wow, I really need it. That was really helpful as far as describing how we are so antagonistic and not at peace with one another, or in his words, how we are so polarized. So fortunately, he decided to come here this weekend here at Crossroads. He's a pretty interesting guy. I don't know how many people you've been around who've spoken to the United Nations. I never have done that. I don't know if you have. I don't know how many people you've been around who've spoken to the National Press Club. I don't know how many people you've been around who've been covered and interviewed by places like the Washington Post and others, all that kind of stuff. He's a pretty smart guy, and he's got some stuff that all of us will benefit to hear. So please welcome my new friend, Andrew Hanauer, to our stage. Come on up, Andrew. Oh, I forgot. We were going to, come on up. We were supposed to do you can help me. Pull the political thing. Go ahead and pull it for me. You wanted to pull it. This is our myth meter. There we go. Well, what myths do we have here, Andrew? If you swallow gum, it stays in your gut for 7 years. That's a myth. Not true. Go ahead, pull it again. I know you want to pull it again. I'll let you pull it 2 more times. Go ahead. Do it. There it is. And here's another myth for us today. Herbert Hoover took baths in dog milk. Not true. American president, in case you don't know, one more time, here it is. It is, this myth is actually true. But we believe that people who disagree with me hate me. That doesn't necessarily have to be true. It doesn't, but we do believe that. We're acting that way. Andrew understands this. He understands the neuroscience behind it. Andrew, talk to us today.
Right. How's everyone doing? Good. You excited to talk politics at church? Yes, all right. I'm an optimistic guy, but I want to start with the bad news, which is why I think that you guys brought me here today, which is that I work with people who are really smart, who have spent their whole lives trying to resolve conflict and violence around the world. East Africa, the Middle East, Eastern Europe, Asia. And about 4 or 5 years ago, they started leaving those places, and they came here. Because the rhetoric, the division, the polarization, the divisiveness was getting so bad that they said, we need to get here before it gets too late. So I think that's why we're here. It's a big topic. I could talk about it for 5 hours. I asked to talk about it for 5 hours. I said, if you're going to invite me, I want to talk about it for 5 hours, and I want to pull the lever thing 3 times. And they said, you can have 20 minutes, but we'll let you pull the lever. So it worked out okay. In many ways, I think the reason I do the work that I do around polarization is because the story of how I became a Christian is actually a story about polarization, believe it or not. When I got to college, my roommate and I were polar opposites, right? I was from the West Coast. He was from the East Coast. I rooted for fantastic, awesome sports teams. He rooted for sports teams from Philadelphia. No one's perfect. I was raised in a secular, totally non-religious house. I had no interest in religion. I didn't like religion. I didn't really want anything to do with religion. He was raised in a sort of traditional evangelical Christian home. His dad was a seminary professor. I mean, he didn't just go to church on Sundays. He went to church on days when I didn't even know that church happened. I mean, we'd be hanging out in the dorm room, and he'd be getting dressed. I was like, where are you going? He's like, I'm going to church. I was like, cool. Isn't it Wednesday? It was mind-blowing. The politics were different, too. Not surprisingly, we didn't disagree about everything, but we were pretty far apart on a lot of issues. In 20 years, I think we voted for the same candidate for president one time, just one time. Once or twice, we voted for different candidates, and they both lost, which in a two-party system it takes real work. But we made it happen. The one thing that we had in common was that we had both lied on our college roommate form. We had said that we were neat, because we hope we get a roommate who is neat. And instead, because God is a just God, and because also sometimes has a sense of humor, we got each other. And that's kind of how it worked out. But even as we disagreed about so many things, and even as messy as he was, we became close friends. And I want to just pause with that first, right? You can be friends with someone who you deeply disagree with, right? And that should not be radical, but I feel like in 2020 that's a little radical. Raise your hand if you are friends with someone who you deeply disagree with about issues. Good. That's good. That's healthy. All right. Here's the other thing, though. As we got to know each other, as we got to talk about politics and religion and all other things, I became really fascinated by the story of the Gospels. It really touched me. I was very unexpected. I didn't think I wanted anything to do with it, but I fell in love with it. And eventually I decided that that's what I wanted for my life, and I became a Christian. I changed my mind about something that was really, really important. And I want to sort of be clear about why. I didn't change my mind because someone lectured me, because a stranger came to me with their facts, right? I changed my mind because I had a relationship with someone who cared about me, who I cared about, who I knew loved me. And so I was able to judge something on the merits of it and not based on whether or not it was coming from my team. That's pretty radical in 2022, right? Judging something by its merits and not by whether or not it's coming from my team. So this brings us to the main point I want to sort of make today. So take out your notepads, your pens, your phones, get this down. This is really important, okay? Polarization is stupid. And we are better than this. Polarization is stupid, and we are better than this. We're going to bust some myths today. I think in busting those myths, we're going to be really telling a story, right? It's a story about our country that we love. A country where right now the loudest, most divisive voices are trying to pull us apart, where millions of us are silent because we don't know where we fit in, or because we think if we speak up, we're going to get shouted down. It's a country where we've definitely lost trust in our politicians. Yeah, maybe we should, but we're also losing trust in each other, right? And if you feel like this is wrong, if you feel like it shouldn't be this way, then take heart, because for one thing, you're not alone. So let's tackle the first myth today is the myth that you saw up there. Not the one about the dog milk. That was super weird. But the other one, the one about people who disagree with me hate me. Now let's be clear, first of all, that even if someone does hate you, Jesus is still pretty clear about what you're supposed to do about that, right? He says to love our enemies. I think the exact phrase is, love your enemies, right? So he's very clear. So we should keep that in mind. But yes, people who disagree with me hate me is a myth. We even have a word for that. It's called meta-perceptions, right? A meta-perception is, I think your team hates me, so I hate you back. I think your side hates me, so I hate you back. But here's the good news. We are wrong about our meta-perceptions. In one survey of Democrats and Republicans, they were off by 250% about how much the other side hated them. 250%. I can't think of any job where if you're wrong by 250%, you don't get fired, right? But that's how wrong we are. And the good news is that when Democrats, Republicans, anyone finds out that the other side doesn't hate them as much as they thought, it starts this kind of positive feedback cycle, right? I can't tell you how much joy this brings me in my work. You know, we go around the country bringing people together from different religions, different politics, races, to do work together. And when you see someone who thought that another group hated them or disliked them, and you see them become friends, and you see the barriers crumble, and Christians and Muslims and Republicans and Democrats, and they realize that God is so much bigger than these divides that we've created in our heads. It's amazing. Polarization is stupid, folks. We can do better than this. So what we're going to do today is we're going to go after 3 myths that kind of fuel that first myth, right? We'll call them bonus myths. You get 4 myths for the price of 1 today. The first is that people who disagree with me agree with the loudest, most divisive voices on their team. Not true. People who disagree with me are all on the extreme end of the political spectrum. Not true. And people who disagree with me are motivated by negative things. That's also not true. But first, when we talk about polarization, I want to be clear, there's sort of a difference between polarization and what we'll call toxic polarization, right? So polarization is just, I disagree with you. That's normal. That's healthy. That's good. I don't think any of us want to live in a country where we all agree about everything. That would be creepy and weird. Here's an example of healthy polarization, right? So healthy polarization, we have a debate in this country about what you call soda, right? Some of us call it soda. Some of us call it pop. People in the South, where my wife is from, call it Coke. Even if it's a Pepsi, they still call it Coke. I don't know how Coke pulled that off, but well done. Look, guys, I call it soda. I know I'm right. Right. You're wrong if you don't, but that's okay. Like, we can disagree about that, right? It doesn't have to become this battle of I hate you, I hate your team. That's healthy polarization. More importantly, guys, there's going to be times when things are just right and wrong, right? Being concerned about polarization doesn't mean you give up your values, you compromise what you care about, you come to the sort of mushy middle. No, stand up for what you believe in. It's right to stand up for what you believe in. But toxic polarization is the stupid kind. It's different. It's changing from I disagree with you to I don't like who you are. I don't like your team. Right? I don't like your team. It's basically us versus them, team sports polarization. Here's why it's toxic. When we get into these two teams, the way things work, we don't stay here. We go like this, right? We get farther and farther apart. Over the last 40 years, Americans haven't changed their mind much at all about their political views, but they hate the other side a lot more. Right? How does that happen? Doesn't it feel like something's changed, something's different? You're not wrong. It's because even though we haven't changed our minds about all these issues, we hate each other a lot more. Polarization is stupid. It's also dangerous. So in the last 5 years, the United States ranks 195th in the world in terms of how quickly we're going like this. So we're going this way, and guys, there's only 195 countries in the world. So we rank last. All right, so bonus myth number 1 is my opponent agrees with the loudest, most divisive voices on their team. This is false. The reason you think it's true, the reason it persists, is actually because of peer pressure, right? Picture a middle school cafeteria. Does that bring back happy memories? Terrifying memories, maybe? So now picture a middle school cafeteria with 350 million people in it, and a lot of them are watching cable news all the time, right? That is what's going on. So how does peer pressure create this larger division? To talk about that, I want to show you probably the weirdest thing you've ever seen at a church. What do you guys see? See faces, right? Everyone see faces? Did you see faces like instantly? Yeah. Did you see emotions? Surprise, maybe fear? How many actual faces are on that screen? 0, right? Yeah, some people say 4, and then they go, no, 5. Like, no, guys, there's no faces, guys. Those are peppers, right? They're not faces. Why do you see faces where they don't exist? This is why. We are wired to see faces. We are wired to see faces because we want to know if something is a threat to us. We want to know if it's going to hurt us or not. And that's also why we formed groups a long time ago. We wanted to form into a group for protection. Originally, we needed protection from lions, right? Today, we're less likely, statistically speaking, to get eaten by a lion. We're more likely to die because we're texting and we wander into the street. But we still form groups for the same reason, right? And here's the thing. When you walk down the street, if you're not texting, if you're actually looking at the people out there, your brain does the same thing that it does with that lion. You look at a person and you decide within a quarter of a second whether they're in your group or they're not in your group, right? So we are wired for this kind of us versus them thing. It's built into us. And here's the main point. Once we're in a group, the thing that we most want is to stay in the group. What happens if we get kicked out? Where do we go? And so when people in our group are being loud and divisive and hateful and negative, a lot of us stay silent. Because the scariest thing is, what happens if we get kicked out of our group? Where do we go? Who will protect us from lions, right? Or whatever the modern equivalent. So we stay silent. And the other side sees that and says, look at those people. They're all okay with this. And so we get further and further apart. It doesn't have to be this way. All right, bonus myth number 2. My political opponent, people who disagree with me, have extreme politics. This is false. Guys, we are actually less divided than we think we are. I want to show you some proof. Here is a picture of what Democrats and Republicans think about immigration, which is probably the most divisive issue we have. So you can see some folks are on the far left of that. Some folks are on the far right. There's a lot of folks in the middle. There's overlap. There's a lot of folks who disagree, but they're within range of each other. Maybe they could compromise or negotiate. That's what Democrats and Republicans think about immigration. This is what Democrats and Republicans think the other side thinks about immigration. All right? Let's see those together. So we are half as divided on the actual issues as we think we are. But our polarization is so toxic, so stupid, that we don't even realize when we have a lot in common that we agree on, right? We're better than this. Lastly, we have a myth that our opponents, our political opponents, people we disagree with, have negative intentions, okay? Raise your hand if you've ever been cut off in traffic while driving. What did you assume about the person who cut you off? They're a jerk, they're rushing, they just want to get ahead, they don't care, they could have hurt me. I mean, they could have hurt you, right? And you might be right, you might totally be right. That's fair. You know what's coming, right? Raise your hand if you've ever cut someone off in traffic. Why'd you do it? You were late. I'll tell you why I cut people off in traffic, because my kids are in the back seat doing exactly the things that I've been talking to you about for the last 15 minutes that Democrats and Republicans do to each other. And I get distracted, right? We are wired to believe that our side acts out of love and their side acts out of hate, right? Again, it's not about giving up your position on an issue. It's just about what's motivating the other side. We think, oh, we're motivated by love and they're motivated by hate. But again, we get it wrong. Research shows that people who try to guess the motives of other groups are like hilariously wrong about the outcomes, right? They get it so wrong. I think part of what props up that myth is that, I mean, let's be honest, politicians, right? We see the politicians of the other side, and they live out our worst fears about those folks. But guys, forget about politicians for a second. Think about your neighbors. Think about the person sitting next to you right now. What are their motivations? Ask them, right? We are less divided than we think we are. All right, so what does this all mean for us as Christians? Well, the one thing I want to ask you to think about doing today, the number one thing that we can do to fight this, is to go do something positive with someone who's not like you. Go do something positive with someone who's not like you. When we're faced with these teams, one of the things that we need to do to keep us from going like this is to build that sort of connective tissue, right? I'm a Democrat. We call it a cross-cutting identity. I'm a Democrat, you're a Republican, but we both serve the homeless together. We both care about the victims of domestic violence. We both want to see racism ended. We both care about families being healthy and whole. We do these things together, and that connects us. This is not mushy. Guys, this is what keeps societies together. In countries around the world with strong cross-cutting identities, civil wars are 12 times less likely. 12 times less likely. So go work together, because the solution to our divisions is not to come to some sort of mushy middle, to compromise our values and learn to tolerate each other. It's to roll up our sleeves and get to work on things that matter in our communities. So go do something positive, and do it with someone who doesn't vote like you. Do it with someone who doesn't look like you. Do it with someone who doesn't worship like you. You know, politicians do a lot of talking. Talk is cheap. Politicians talk a lot. Angry people on the internet talk a lot. But there's this old saying from the civil rights movement that I love. It says, don't tell me what you believe. Show me what you do. Then I'll know what you believe, right? Everyone's talking about their values. Let's live our values. In Matthew 25, Jesus says, I was hungry and you gave me something to eat. I was thirsty and you gave me something to drink. I was a stranger and you invited me in. I needed clothes and you clothed me. I was sick and you looked after me. I was in prison and you visited me. That's what we need to be doing. That's what we need to be doing out in this world, not talking about it, but doing it. So we have a choice. We can be part of the problem as Christians, or we can be a beacon of light. And the rest of the country can know what we believe by what we do. Thank you so much.
Andrew, very good. Every time I hear you talk about this, I get more and more out of it. The tribe thing, that's just spell that out more again for the tribes, because I read a book a while ago on called Freakonomics. A lot of people in here have. That looked at the hidden reasons why things are. One of the interesting things the guy arrived at was when these gangs are fighting, the actual gang leaders, they want peace because they're making money, they're doing fine. Mm-hmm. But the violence gets started by the younger guys who are trying to make their mark in the world. Yeah. And that's why there's a this and that. I get a sense like in our climate, we probably have most Republicans and most Democrats that would really like peace, but it seems like there's some vested interest to divide us.
Yeah. Polarization is a multi-billion-dollar industry, right? If you want to sell a book, if you want to raise money for your cause, if you want to get elected, if you want to be popular on social media, nuance is not exciting, right? They are evil. That's what sells. That's what makes money. And I think, again, it's not just that that's landing on us in a vacuum. It's landing on us with brains that are wired for it, that go, yeah, I want that. And so we're just feeding it. But it's absolutely vested, very wealthy interests that are doing this.
Yeah, very few of us probably say something like, they are evil. We're more comfortable with, they are idiots.
Yeah.
You know, that's just another form of that.
Yeah.
You even coming into a relationship with Jesus, that was difficult for you because of the whole tribe thing, right?
Sure, yeah. I mean, I grew up in a community where if I said, yeah, I've decided to become a Christian, people, at best, my perception was that people would look at me like I was crazy, right? And part of what's interesting is that our perceptions are often wrong. And my family has been so supportive and loving. My friends have been so supportive, even if they don't agree with it. But my perception was that I was taking this enormous risk, right? That I was going out into the wilderness and that all of the people I grew up who cared about me were going to leave me. We're going to say, I don't want anything to do with you. You've been brainwashed. So it's interesting also that we think other people are going to act more negatively toward us than they actually are.
How close to a civil war do you think we are?
I don't think that we're close in terms of like time, but what I think we are is on a really negative trend. So what you want to, yeah, I mean, what you want to do is cut off bad trends before they get too far, right? So I think it's alarmist to say, oh, we're going to have a civil war tomorrow. I think it's complacent to say, oh, we're fine. Like, guys, everything's fine. You know, we're not shaking each other's hands in the Oval Office or whatever, but otherwise everything's fine. That's not true. But I think the trend is what we're worried about.
It's really crazy. You showed the immigration thing up there. And the verse I talked about earlier is, happy are those who make peace, or blessed are the peacemakers. It just dawned on me, like, how crazy would it be if a Democrat would say, oh, and by the way, I think that that immigrants should follow the laws of the land. How crazy would it be for a Republican to say, oh, and by the way, I think we should have compassion for immigrants who are here? I mean, those are two simple, basic things that you tend to not hear on either side. You just gave me a reason for it, because we don't want to be deemed a traitor to our tribe.
Yeah, or we're afraid that if we disarm and they don't disarm, then it'll just pull everything farther towards them. I mean, Trevor Noah, the comedian, has this great skit where he talks about, you know, when you get really angry at someone and you're ready to just unload and then they apologize unexpectedly and you're like, oh, right? Like, I wasn't expecting that. But you're still really angry, so you have to like calm down a little bit. If people are so, I think, ready for that kind of message, right? I was watching the debates with my wife, and we were shocked by how all these opportunities the candidates have. These are people on the same team, right? And still, they kept passing up chances to say good things about each other, and instead would say sort of good things about each other, which they then used to like, make a point that they were better. I think we're just sick of it, honestly. I mean, I think we want better from our leaders.
Yeah, things are, yes. Right. Yeah, I respect Joe Biden's years of service. But he's so old, he really can't run it all. It's all just a one-up. I think one of the things that I feel and I think when I interact with people who are different than me and have different views than me is, and specifically, the only difference that really matters to me is, do you know Christ or do you not know Christ? Because that's what I'm really concerned about with your heart and where you're going. And I remind myself when I'm in those, that I'm playing on a different level. If all of us should be playing on a different level. Jesus has nothing to do with alcohol. Meaning, I'm sorry, if you've got an opinion on that, he's just not going to. Jesus has nothing to do, he doesn't speak into tobacco. He has nothing to do, he doesn't speak into firearms. Get it? Alcohol, tobacco, firearms. He has nothing to do with the tax code. He has nothing to do with the Republican Party's politics or the Democratic Party's politics. What do I mean he has nothing to do with it? What I mean by that, it's not centered to his mission. His mission is this. He dies on a cross. All of my garbage, all of my venom, all of my, spewing of calling people stupid or whatever is transferred on his back. And all of his goodness, all of his righteousness is transferred to my back. So actually, when God looks at me, my identity is I am loved, I'm cherished, is his son. That's what a Christian is. It's not how you vote. It's that. That's that. It's really serious. It's that simple, and it is only that. Only that. And so what it means is, when someone gets really upset about my faith in Christ leads me to believe this, but it's not my identity, or leads me to say this, they'll get freaked out. But I have to remember, I have an identity that God has given me. All they have as an identity is that political belief. And so they can't really give up on that or talk about it at all because their whole world would crumble. That's what happens, friends, when your world is centered on just ideas that are out there, it crumbles.
I think we need to be, as Christians, we need to be starting with our faith and then working outward. We might get to different viewpoints on different issues, right? But it starts with what does Jesus say, and then it flows outward. It doesn't start with what is on cable news, and then I bring that to church with me, right? It's got to be flipped. We've got to flip that. And I hear pastors all around the country tell us that. I say, I've got our folks for 1 hour a week. Cable news has them every night. Yeah. And we need to flip that.
The problem is we don't think that way. We're not smart enough to say, well, that's really what's informed me. We're not. We have been formed by the ways of the world. We're not being formed by the ways of Christ, but no, we don't see it that way. It's just that's the news station that has truth. Right. Friends, we've got to be better. We have to be better. And those of us in this room, whether you know Christ or not know Christ, you've come into an environment where you're up for this kind of talk. We have to be better. Our country has to be better. Where are the leaders who will give hope? Where are the leaders that will give peace? One last little graphic for us on hope that shows kind of the polarization, how the kingdom of God is different than the right and the left. I think we have it up on the screen. We can show it here right now. Yes. What is our reason for hope? If you're conservatives on the right, it is if we preserve the moral, cultural, economic, and political values of our past, we will withstand the worldly gravitational pull to the bottom, and our nation will once again thrive. If we're on the left, if we're liberal, if we allow our moral, cultural, economic, and political values to evolve, we will free ourselves from the bonds of the past until we truly thrive. So right there's this built-in tension, which, by the way, who builds this tension for us? Who creates this tension?
Well, I mean, I think that there's real pain and real problems in the world, and I think that we develop ideologies around them. I think what gets problematic is when we take those and we divorce them from the core teachings of Jesus. I mean, if you could have an ideology, but if your ideology leads you to a point where you say, oh, I'm not going to help this person because they're not of my political group or whatever it is, then you've lost touch with what you were supposed to be in.
Right. I would also say, what would we feel if we knew that there was a corporation that was spending hundreds of millions of dollars to influence you? A corporation that was looking for power and was spending hundreds of millions of dollars for that. You would say, really? I said, yeah, it's called Republican and Democrat parties. They're corporations that have to have hundreds of millions of dollars for their power. And they live in this tension. They want to exasperate this tension. Yes?
Yeah, I mean, it's their jobs to win, right? And sometimes they're not equal in terms of how right they are about issues, but either way, their job is to win. It's not to follow the core teachings of our faith.
Right.
That's just not what they're at.
So the kingdom, which is the purple, the radical middle, it says this. Our reason for hope is if we follow Jesus, lead others to him, and engage our culture in a healthy way, we will pave his way for life-giving truth, and those who follow him will receive eternal life. And then we can figure out what to do with the elements of truth that might be in the red or the elements of truth that might be in the blue. Good for us. Hey, let's thank Andrew for being with us today. Good stuff, brother. Good stuff. Thank you. All right, I want to give us a couple more things, and then we're done. We're really done. Is this series being helpful so far? Is it being helpful? I just tell you, our attendance has gone down. It may continue to go down, and that's fine with me. That's fine with me. We will be a place where you will be pushed intellectually, you will be pushed spiritually, and if you only want your church to be an amen corner, this is not the right church for you. Not the right church for you. I care about you too much to just have you sucked into the vortex of what happens there, and specifically, I care about my call before God too much to be silent on basic no-brainer things that are in the scriptures, and every single hero of the faith has lived out. Every one. This is not controversial, weird thinking. This goes to the core of who the church has always been when it's right. Now, if this is intriguing for you, hearing talk like this, I can't do this all the time on stage. Other people speak on stage. I got a lot more God's doing to me that I'm trying to get out to help people. And I think it's important. In fact, I hope you have people you're trying to help. I hope you have people who are following you. The Bible tells us we should have that. In the book of 1 Corinthians chapter 11, verse 1, the Apostle Paul says, follow my example. Imitate me as I follow Christ. If you want to know Christ, imitate me, moi. The book of Philippians, he also says a similar way. He says this, what you have learned and received and heard and seen in me, practice these things. The God of peace will be with you. Practice these, whatever I'm doing, practice these things. Over and over and over again, this happens again and again and again and again. I just want to say, I would like to help you if there's any way I can help you. And one of the ways I want to is stuff that's being put out on social media. If you want a diet of this kind of stuff versus other stuff that's out there swirling around, you can do it. You can follow me on Instagram at Brian Tome. Recently, I do Q&As every other week where people ask questions. I've heard that very, very helpful for them to hear. We'll put a couple of them up there on the screen. The kind of stuff that's there where people go, oh, I didn't know. I don't know that I could ask that question. I didn't know that there was a place where I could get help. There's questions that people ask that I can't put on screen in a church service, but are really good. And they need to be answered, and you can find that there. You can find out stuff about what I'm doing with family or how I'm having fun or whatever. It's just a way to connect if you want a different voice that might help you get a little closer to Christ or just have some levity in the midst of your day. So you can check that out. And we're not going to be doing politics 24/7 here. We're not going to do that. It's not going to happen over and over and over again. It's going to be turned off after this series, and then where you can pick it up or be helped from here on forward, if you want to, is another channel we started called The Radical Middle. When you leave here today, you're going to get a bumper sticker that you can put on or you can throw away if you want. If you're going to throw it away, don't take it because it costs a lot of money. Just keep it yourself. Don't panic, The Radical Middle. And there's a social channel we've started called The Radical Middle where we're trying to help us see we can have peace no matter who the president is. We can always put people over politics. We can get to a new place. And I want to ask you to go and follow us. Follow us on The Radical Middle. Follow me at Brian Tome if you want help, if you want something that's a little bit different, because I think God has something different for you than what our culture is giving to you and I. Let me pray for us right now. God, thank you for the truth you've given us. Thank you for voices like Andrew. Thank you for a great country we live in called the United States of America. Thank you for it. There's no other place I'd rather be. And there's no other time I'd want to be in than right now, this critical time in our nation's history. Help us to be the ones who give peace, and we have the blessing of happiness. Amen. Have a great week. We'll see you next weekend.